שמע שיר חדש ובנענע.
Welcome everyone. Today is Yom Sheni of Parshas Toldos, and as the legacy of Avram leaves the screen, so to speak, our attention is turned towards the lessons that we can draw from the lives of Yitzchak and Yaacov, particularly centering around the issues of beginning the development of Am Yisrael, who will be the one to develop Am Yisrael, how it will be developed, and of course the ownership over Eretz Yisrael. Of course, nothing could be more relevant today in our era as today, on this very day, Yom Sheni, there will be a vote by the meeting place of the world at the United Nations in New York to decide the fate of Eretz Plishtim and Eretz Gerar, otherwise known as Gaza. And we will find that Yitzchak Avinu had great interaction with these places, and something that we need to understand how it's connected to Eretz Yisrael, what its relationship is with Eretz Yisrael. Is it Eretz Yisrael? Is it somewhere else? Because the world would like to declare officially today, which I believe is a huge, huge mistake. But nevertheless, this is the reality that we're dealing with, that the administration of Gaza will be put into the hands of not Israel. Everybody but. It'll be a complex group, and the unfortunate price, as there always is a terrible price regarding Eretz Yisrael that needs to be contended with, whether it's the money that Avram had to pay, the problems that Yitzchak had with Avimelech, Melech Gerar, whether it was Yaakov's difficulties with Esav. There's always this front and center is always money. There's an incredible connection between wealth, the relationship to wealth, which is Gashmios, and the connection between the Jewish people to Eretz Yisrael. We're going to explore today exactly the nuances of that unique kesher and how the Avos actually received their wealth, and how that their wealth was connected to the establishment of the Jewish dominion over Eretz Yisrael, which we hope and pray will be completed by Mashiach Meher V'Yamin Amen. But as we are in a wonderful process of redemption, that we see the miracles of Hashem, we acknowledge them, and we thank Hashem for them day by day, we are a bit perplexed, a bit concerned that today seems to be a giant step backwards. Although is it a Yerida L'Tzorech Aliyah? We shall see. But what's technically happening is that today there'll be a vote to say that 20 nations or something, including all the Arab nations, will come into Gaza and administer it with the purpose of establishing a Palestinian state. This is very, very troubling. It's a concession that President Trump made to the Arab nations to get their support, and of course their financial support. And therefore, we must raise this question: at what price peace? And whether peace and shalom. It's interesting to note that the word shalom has a vav. The word to pay is the shalem without a vav. What's the vav? Shalom is not possible in Eretz Yisrael as it is in other countries without Hashem's involvement. Because we say, Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom. And throughout the ages, and especially in our era, since the return of what we can say now is close to the majority of the Jewish people to our beloved Eretz Yisrael, the issue of peace has been front and center. Because as the Yishuv began to develop, almost immediately, although at the very beginnings the Arabs were okay because our numbers were insignificant, and if anything, we enhanced the economics of it, and the Arabs benefit, which of course they always do till today. But in terms of sovereignty, as long as the British were in charge, at very beginning they said, but as they saw the hatzlacha of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael, and that's the key to today's shiur, there is a unique connection between Eretz Yisrael and rapid development of wealth. So people understand that, or should understand, that when the Jewish people reconnect with Eretz Yisrael, money becomes something quite miraculous, as we shall see. And that partially explains the unusual phenomenon of the great strength of the Israeli shekel today against all logic. I mean, our country has been pummeled by war, not only since for now, but forever. And yet the American dollar is dropping to the lowest levels against the Israeli shekel. The Israeli shekel is stronger than at any time it has been in our history. What is the key to this strength? Why is it that billions and billions of US dollars flood Israel and therefore deflate the value of the dollar against the shekel? Well, where is this economic juggernaut heading and why? And despite that, look at the challenge we're facing today. Literally, the basic sovereignty of Am Yisrael over Eretz Yisrael once again, and sadly, as it is in the last 10 years or so, beginning with the Biden administration, now Trump puts his signature and his vote to the idea of a Palestinian state. This is a tragic development, but we shall see what Hashem has in store. Okay, so let's begin. Hashem can make shalom with the vav, it's mechubar to Hashem, but shalem, or to pay, with a financial piece. Why did Trump make this concession? Because he wants the Arabs to pay their fair share, as is his doctrine. I don't want to pay. I don't want Americans to pay. Let private citizens pay. Let those countries pay for the rehabilitation of their own Arab brothers, which makes sense, but at what cost? Not at the cost of the sovereignty of the land of Israel, which Hashem can only create the peace. Anybody who's tried to make peace, from Jimmy Carter to all the leaders of Israel, have all found what the Chazal tell us to be, that Eretz Yisrael will be, that Yerushalayim will be a thorn in their eye. It is impossible to take the city of peace, and particularly Eretz Yisrael, which is uniquely under Hashem's supervision, and claim that you have the resources and the plans and the logic to establish peace. This is not without precondition that you will affirm God's will regarding Eretz Yisrael, that it is the possession of Am Yisrael. If you start with that supposition, as Koresh, the great King Koresh, did back in his day, that will meet with great success. Hashem will do it regardless. Hashem will make the peace. But the mistake that's being made here is really classic, but also deeply, deeply troubling. We shall see a little perspective on it from the facts and from the midrashim that we're going to analyze. Okay, so with that introduction, let me launch into it. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov all had episodes regarding the accumulation of wealth and their related ability to have dominion or sovereignty over Eretz Yisrael. Let's begin with Avram, for example. We know that Avram Avinu's position was that he was directly promised by Hashem that he was not going to be a ger in Eretz Yisrael, a sojourner without any place other than what the wilderness, or wherever he would receive the hospitality of those to pitch his tent. You know, he was the outright owner of Eretz Yisrael. Hashem gave him many nevuos to that effect from the very beginning of Lech Lecha. And yet, Avram understood that Hashem had decided to allow the Canaanite nations usurping out of Africa, led originally by Nimrod, and then going on to conquer vast portions of the God inheritance to the nations of Shem, the Semites, which include Jews and other Mesopotamian nations, but not African nations. African nations have Africa. They are the Yorshim of the world. Noah divided the world, according to God's will, into these three sectors: the lands of Shem, the lands of Ham, the lands of Yafet. Yafes was given Europe, which is Mishmane Haaretz, tremendous wealth, and the cream of Gashmias on earth, which Chazal tell us is centered in Germania Shebeyavan. It's Rome, Germany, Greece, this center, Western Europe. And as we get into the Indian Western Europe, that's his primary concern. Moves all the way to Persia. Persians are Europeans. They're Iranians, as I explained, all the way through Spain. That is, until up until Moscow, Russia, that area, that is the Yerusha of the Bnei Yefes, including islands of the Mediterranean, Bechula. But Africa, and beginning with Egypt and the entire continent, and perhaps some of the islands very close to in the Mediterranean, belongs to the nations of Ham. And those nations, which included all the 7 nations of Canaan, who were descendant from Mitzrayim, Ham, including the great rebel against the Hashem, Nimrod, and the Chaverav, and the 4 kings that came to attack the 5 kings in the days of Avram Avinu. They were all Africans, and they wanted to dominate the holy lands, the lands of the spiritual leaders of the world, not the physical leaders of the world, but the Semites, meaning Shem ben Noach. That is the spiritual inheritors of the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, beginning with Shem, Semites. They are the holy men of the world. They're supposed to teach the connection between this world and connection to the Ribono Shel Olam, and will moderate or be mediated by Yefes, who will attach to those principles and serve those principles and support those principles, both physically and financially. And the Bnei Cham will be lifted along by the other 2 brothers who have these schuyot, and the Bnei Cham will eventually rectify and learn from the other 2 brothers, and that was the idea. But the reverse happened, is that Nimrod came and said, no, I will become the spiritual mentor of the world. I'll take over the Semitic lands. That's Mesopotamia, including Eretz Israel, Syria, etc. And Europe and so on will serve us. And Maisa Shahaya Kachaya, that's the generation of the Dor HaFloga, the generation of the Tower of Babel, which Avram stood as the lone singular protest to this. One, Echad Haya Avram. And such is the role of the Jewish people today, to stand against all those who are rebelling against the will of Hashem. That's our job. That's our job. We cannot be part of a United Nations. That doesn't allow us to lead it. We cannot be part of confederations and associations of soldiers to bring peace to the world that are not led by the principles of Hashem. This is corruption, this is evil, this is a distortion, and can only lead to shalem and not shalom. It's going to cost, it will not create peace. And Avram understood this. He understood that Nimrod's system of the human will and power, this is the Nazis' philosophy, this is the philosophy of both fascism and communism that we see proliferating, and Islam to a certain extent, and Christianity when it was not separated from the state, which thank God it's been mostly. Then we have systems that oppose. So Avram stood alone against Nimrod. Now, what was Avram's particular relationship to Eretz Yisrael and to money? So he understood, and he said as much. Ger v'toshevani, you Canaanites, you Nimrodites, you those who are rebelling against God, including all the people of Sodom, including all the Plishtim, which is specifically enumerated, the spiritual heirs of today's quote-unquote Palestinians. They are the Plishtim of old. They claim the territory of what we call today Gaza, and that in entree into Egypt. Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Ironically, don't think that this is a coincidence of any kind. This is a spiritual continuity of the same clash between Klippa of the Plishtim, who have no right to be there and no right to be in charge. They fought tooth and nail against Shaul HaMelech, who tried to reestablish the monarchy and then go on and establish Beis HaMikdash. He didn't know. They defeated Shaul HaMelech terribly. It was only David HaMelech who succeeded in quelling them and stifling them, and many others, in order to open the pathway to Ir Shel Shalem, to Yerushalayim Yer Kodesh, and the establishment of the Beis HaMikdash. Plishtim are a massive, massive obstacle, a massive klipa, and we're experiencing it today once again in the form of Gaza, and to another extent, the Anshe Sodom, which is the leadership of Yehuda Shomron, which has been usurped, much like Melech Sodom controlled, was a key figure in the battle, and all the kings around him. The kings of Sodom were the ones who battled against the 4 kings. They are usurpers. Avram, however, related to them with great respect and kindness. He pleaded for the welfare of the cities of Sodom. He also made concessions to the Bnei Chet, as we saw with the purchase of Maras Machpelah. He said to them, Ger v'toshav ani machem, say Chazal, he says, you have a choice. If you're going to treat me like things are right now, but with integrity, you will sell me my portion of Eretz Yisrael that I want right now to bury Sarah, that Sarah's burial demands. If not, I can take it by force. So Avram understood there was a delay, there was a siba, there was a lack of maturity and ripeness. There was no development in Klal Yisrael. Avram would go on to have a Yishmael and other children of Keturah. So would Yitzchak go on to have an Esau. But the maturity of Eretz Yisrael is not fully articulated until the sons of Yaacov come and take possession of it, which does not happen till Yahushua. It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. But the seeds have been planted. Now, let's look at Avram's relationship to wealth and to Eretz Yisrael. So he said, I'm a ger. A ger is not somebody that is prominent, not somebody who's in a leadership role, not somebody who's in the wealth. In fact, Chazal tell us that when the ger waxes wealthy, he'll buy the Jews as slaves. This is the greatest tragedy. So we see that a ger is not someone we associate with great wealth. And Avram, l'chora, didn't have. When he leaves Padan Aram, when he leaves Hara, the land where his father Terach settled, and part of the Semitic spiritual B'nai Noach culture, okay, which unfortunately was populated by Nimrod, the rebel, he had there great influence. As a nefesh also Becharon is identified by Chazal as the 2,000-year period of Torah that commenced with the year 2000 after creation, initiated by Avram and Sarah. Avram and Sarah were the first teachers of Torah to the world. Shem ben Noach was not. Shem ben Noach kept a tradition, but it was privately managed. It wasn't dispersed to the world. It is only through Avram that the tradition of Shem became widespread. And we can't go into the details right now, but there's many proofs to that. So when Avram came from Mesopotamia, came from Haran, he was a very successful, wealthy man. Chazal tell us that he was a great astronomer, he was a great astrologer, he was a great doctor, he was a great advisor, that all Malchei Umos HaOlam were at his doorstep. He was literally Nasi Elokim B'Karbeinu. He was the biggest celebrity in the entire world. He was at his doorstep, and I mentioned this last week, that people came for advice and came for refuot, and so it should be. And he had to leave it all to go into Eretz Yisrael, where he was a pauper. He had absolutely nothing. He lived in a tent. He didn't have big flocks. He didn't have money. And Hashem says, don't worry, Lech Lecha. I'll tell you there, you don't worry, you're worried about reputation. Don't worry about it. You're worried about money. Don't worry about it. You're worried about health. You're worried about everything. No, don't worry about it. Hashem sent him there penniless. That was one of the great tribulations of Avram, that he went there without any wealth, without any stature, without anything. And what happens to Avram is an interesting thing. From the moment he engages with Paro, all of a sudden, he is bestowed wealth. In whose merit? In the merit of Sarah. His first pathway to any wealth in Eretz Yisrael was only through his wife Sarah. So we see Sarah is really the key to opening Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. In fact, so much so, the Medrash tells us that when Paro pays her off, he gives her two things. He gives her Hagar, his daughter. You understand why? Hagar, who would eventually be the mother of Yishmael and the wife of Avram Avinu. He wants in on the party. He says, listen, if Sarah is the mother who brings the Kinyan and Eretz Yisrael and great wealth, I want my daughter to have the same blessings as Sarah. I've heard a lot of stories about unfortunate people who want to convert to Judaism, but for the wrong reasons. And some of the rationale is that they say, well, every Jew that I see is very successful and put together, and I want to be Jewish, and I'm going to have money. The minute I become a Jew, I'm going to become wealthy. I'm not saying that that's not the case, but that's not the reason to convert. And that's not necessarily the logic. Jews have an affinity to wealth, and I'm going to explain why. It's a remarkable thing. Why is it? How is it that what the non-Jews have noticed throughout the years, that Jews have a power of Yosef HaTzadik, a power of Avraham Avinu, a power of Yitzchak, as we'll see, a power of Yaakov, we'll see, or Yosef HaTzadik, to command vast wealth, is something that is not logical and not usual and has a reason behind it. And the main reason behind it is because of the incredible connection between Klal Yisrael, Torah, Hashem, and Eretz Yisrael. That's where the money comes from. It comes from our inherent soul genetics, from the fact that we're B'nai Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov. I'll quote you, for example, a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, in Bava Kama, relevant to the idea in Perikhes, where the idea is when you damage somebody else, you're liable to pay damages. There are 5 areas of damages. Nezek, Tsar, Ripu, Shevet, Boshet. There is what the physical loss to the body is. There's the pain that's caused, physical pain. And then there is things caused by you caused an illness, you struck and you caused illness, or possibly you had unemployment, shevet, and boshet is you caused them emotional pain, torture. All these things are liable. You're liable. A Jew is liable. Even to a slave, a Jew is liable, according to most Tanoim. And it says there's an interesting thing. One of the Mishnayos teaches, one of the Gemaras teaches, that if you humiliate, someone, which is the concept of boshet, right? They said, you know what? It's a kol lefi hamabayish v'hamitbayesh. There's a sliding scale of boshet. When you embarrass the prime minister or the president of the United States, it's not the same as if you embarrass, a cleaning worker in an administrative building. It's not the same. Their kavod is not the same kavod. That's what the Mishnah says. Says Rabbi Akiva, no, it's not true. When it comes to Jews, all right, Ro'ei nosan ki him b'nei chorim sheyardu min nichseihem. What does that mean? A prince is somebody who owned land. Back in the day of Rabbi Akiva, if you were a landowner, even through the Middle Ages, that was distinguished between you and a regular schnook. Let's put it that way. So you look at them as princes, as barons that have lost their possessions. That's what a needy Jew is. A poor Jew is never viewed as a nebuch, a low position. A Jew inherently is a ben chorin, and therefore, says Rabbi Akiva, no matter what you do to whomever, the level of boshet that you have to pay to a Jew is constant, whether they are landlords or whether they are simple people cleaning the streets. It makes no difference. And a classic case given in the Mishnah says, if you do certain things like you blow in somebody's ear, you pull a woman's sheitel off in Rosh Hashanah, that's very embarrassing, right? Pull their sheitel off. You pull a guy's clothes off in the middle of the street. These things are all cause embarrassment, terrible embarrassment. So there's a set fine, which is consistent for every Jewish woman. So Par Rosh Ha'isha B'shuk. If a person pulls a woman's hair covering off in the street and she's married and she's deeply embarrassed by this, the fine is 400 zuz. 400 zuz is a lot of money. Daily wages were like 2 zuz, like the chad gadya, the little goat. We trade zuze, so 400 times that, wow, that's like, that's like a 200 days salary. That's a lot of money. So the clever person who did it to her had a wicked plan. Brilliant, but wicked. He said, okay, Rebbe Tenley's give me a chance. I got to gather it's a lot of money. Give me a chance to gather the money and see if I really, whatever. I want to buy time because I don't have the money right now for whatever reason. So Rabbi Akiva says to him, okay, you have till such and such a time to bring the money. Meanwhile, he knew that this woman was a rather lowly person who conducted herself in a rather lowly manner. So he found her by where she lived, the chutzner where she lived, and he broke in front of her a kad of shemen. Shemen is a how shall I say, is something special as an adornment. In those days when oil was used as we might use soap and shampoo, it both was used for cleaning and for beautifying. They knew how to use it in that sense. So maybe they made it into a shampoo of sorts, whatever it was. So, but it's also valuable in its own right. Think of Elisha and the woman who was impoverished, and he told her to fill up her pots oil that kept pouring miraculously, and he says, "Go and pay off your creditors with this." Oil was money. So he broke a cot of oil in front of her. The oil is spilling onto the ground. And what does she do? She removes her own wig. She starts scooping up the oil and rubbing it into her hair. Quickly, the man sets up Adim and says, "Look at this conduct. Look how easily she removed her hair covering in order to put on this oil." Comes back to Rabbi Akiva and says, "Rabbi, lazu ani noten arbat malzuz." For this woman who conducts herself in such a vulgar manner, you're giving me a fine as if I insulted the queen? Rabbi says to him, "Lo amart klum." You have no claim. You have no claim whatsoever. Because whatever she does to herself is her business, but what you do to her, we view her, as he said earlier, Kibnei Avram, Yitzchak, Yaacov. Interesting. Shehem b'nei Avram, Yitzchak, Yaacov. Now, another mission of the same light, also from the annals of the Baba Kamas and Baba Metzias and Mabasras. There is a mission of Baba Metzia which says, you hire workers. You have to feed them. That's the rule. That depends what the rule is in the city. He says, whatever it is, you have to feed them. Okay? So there was a Maisa that went out that one of the Tanaim sons said, "Okay, I'm going to go out and hire workers." He comes back to his father and he says, "I hired workers." He goes, wait, you just did a mistake. Go back and tell them that the meal that they're going to receive is a very simple meal of pot for kitnios. They're going to get bread and that's all. Why? Because if not, you must feed your simple workers that have nothing. They work from day-to-day laborers. Kisudas shlomo b'shaito. You're gonna have to serve them duck and champagne and chateaubriand. I don't know if it's kosher. And herring and cholent and not cholent, herring and pate de foie gras, if that's kosher. No, I don't know if that's kosher. I think it is. Okay, so yeah, ducks and goose. What are you talking about? And beef? Why? Meat boards? Why? Why? Kihem b'nei Avram Yitzchak and Yaakov. Think. To be a ben Avram Yitzchak and Yaakov means to be a prince. Means to be a princess. It equals royalty. The same royalty as lahavdil million havdalos, being the British monarch or the U.S. president or anybody else. Monarch, you deserve a palace. You deserve to be fed, on the highest level of culinary excellence. But 1 second, they're simple workers. They're just trying to put a piece of crust of dark bread on their table. Why, unless I make a tanai with them that I'm not going to, and they're mochel, they allow me not to, but inherently, this is what they deserve. Because they're B'nai Avram Yaakov. So let's understand that kesher. It's not just because it didn't say they're Avram Yaakov stam, because this is the reality that Avram Yaakov lived and put spiritually genetics into each and every Jew, due to our connection to the Avos, due to our connection to Torah, due to our connection to Eretz Yisrael, and due to our direct connection to Hashem. We therefore are elevated in the world to be kings and princes, something that the world really, really struggles with. Really struggles with. And instead of understanding it, that they benefit from it, which is the truth, and they will benefit greatly from it. That the B'nai Yefes, if they'll only accept Klal Yisrael as the true owners of Eretz Yisrael, and the Beis HaMikdash is a source of immense wealth, health, showering blessings on the world, they're so stupid. Chazal tell us, if the Goyim only knew how much money and health and wealth they're losing by not allowing us to build the Beis HaMikdash, they would run and build it for us. This is the truth. This is the truth that must blare throughout the world. It's the idiocy of the notions that by giving quote unquote land to Palestine, this is going to be a good thing for the world. It is exactly against Hashem's will, and it cuts off. Now look, I don't have to tell you, these nations that recognize Palestine, which is a complete sham. The first thing that happened They got a bill for $515 billion from the Palestinian Authority. All they got was a massive bill. Oh, yeah, you're going to have to rebuild the entire Gaza. That's billions of dollars. And you're going to have to continue to pay us our salaries. Of course, we need bridges and hospitals and everything and cars and blah, 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 blah. You'll also pay for our military, and that's besides the point, so we can attack Israel. But in the meantime, you owe all they'll do by recognizing a Palestinian Authority over anything is bankruptcy and billions of dollars of lost money, and they don't care. They still don't care. They refuse to accept the fact that Israel will bestow blessing on them, but that Israel should be sovereign, sticks in their craw, and it's the one thing the world can never see themselves conceding, not Harabais, not Yudah Shomron, and not even Gaza, which is called Eretz Plishtim, which according to Chazal is Eretz Yisrael, but has a lower status. In fact, that's why Yitzhak went to Gerar. He couldn't stay in the heartland of Eretz Yisrael. He couldn't stay in Hebron or Shechem. He couldn't even stay in Beersheba initially. He went into Eretz Gerar because Eretz Gerar is the transitional land between Israel and Mitzrayim and Egypt. That area is Eretz Yisrael. It does belong to us, but it is not on the same level of Kedusha. Rashi brings a Medrash Beferish, not the same level of Kedusha that the rest of Eretz Yisrael is. There are dargas, just like in Eretz Yisrael, there are 10 miles of Kedusha. Beit Shem, Beersheba is not as holy as Hebron, and Hebron is not as holy as Yerushalayim, and Har Bayis is not as holy as the rest of Yerushalayim, and the Beis HaMikdash is holier than the rest of Har Bayis, and you go on all the way to the Kodesh Kodashim. That's the way it is. Eser Kedushos. There are 10 levels of Kedusha. Gerar is on the lowest rung of Kedusha Eretz Yisrael. Mishnah even speaks about Syria, which was Kibush David HaMelech. He conquered it as an individual. That also has a status. Conquered lands have a status if it was done. And we can't get into that right now. But there will be, and Eretz Yisrael will and can expand if there's a centralized government. Because I'll tell us that Eretz Yisrael could expand the world. How? If we run the world. then all the world will be Eretz Yisrael, but only if we run it according to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov's covenant with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Torah mitzvahs. Okay, so that remains to be seen. Avram's relationship to wealth begins with Sarah. Sarah receives Hagar. Sarah receives land of Goshen, which later would become the area in which Klal Yisrael would find respite during their bitter 400 years of Galus. So they never really left Eretz Yisrael. Goshen is Eretz Yisrael on an even lower level than Eretz Gerar, because really it's part of Egypt. Elama, it was given to Sarah, so to be conquered by Sarah, so to speak, by beating up Paro with her malachim that she sent, which is a presage of all the makos that would later come to Klal Yisrael. Egypt had to cough up a lot of wealth and had to cough up a piece of his own territory, Eretz Goshen, which is really part of Eretz Yisrael. And I've mentioned how that area happened to fall back into Israel's hands temporarily in the 73 war through Ariel Sharon. And eventually it will come back to us. It'll be all part of Eretz Yisrael. But it's Sarah's Yerusha to Eretz Yisrael. So it's Sarah who is the key figure in Avram laying down roots in Eretz Yisrael, because he would yet produce, and his son would produce people who were not going to receive Eretz Yisrael. Sarah, however, was clear and straight. She understood it was only Yitzhak. She kept Yitzhak under her stewardship. And as we said last week, she gave her very life, Ki'ilu, at the Akedah, to ensure that Yitzhak would continue to live. And therefore, Rivka becomes her replacement and goes into the Ohel Sarah. Rivka then has the identical job of Sarah to be the Yoreshet of Eretz Yisrael, because Yitzhak couldn't do it yet, because Yitzhak had still not built the 12 tribes. But Rivka understood and picked Yaakov, who would build the tribes. You understand? So the key in the original years were the women of the Avos, the Imahos. So what happens when Sarah dies? It's a remarkable thing. Avram is forced to buy a piece of Eretz Yisrael. Initially, what did Avram want to buy? Avram wanted to buy, we had in last week's Parshah, he wanted to buy a cave, just the cave of Machpelah. That's it, just the cave. I'll deal with the cave. Cave costs 20 grand. That's it. Whatever it is. Comes along Ephron Hachiti, the Canaanite, and he says, oh, Avram, I'm going to give you the field and the cave. Who's talking about a field? No one's discussing a field. All of a sudden, Ephron introduces the idea of, I'm going to sell you a field. Avram didn't ask for a field. He asked for a cave that was on the edge of the Sadeh. Much cheaper purchase. Avram didn't want any more purchase or couldn't understand, or maybe it wasn't spiritually connected to any other part of Eretz Yisrael than the burial cave of the Avos, because the Avos would be the root of Kibush Eretz Yisrael. But Avram said, I'm a ger. Right now, I'm not even a Toshav. So what do I need Eretz Yisrael for? Not yet. A burial cave, however, to establish the precedent for the future. Okay, fine, but I don't need a Sadeh. It's not practical right now. We're not practically living in Eretz Yisrael. Wrong, says the Hashgacha protest through Sari Meinu. Comes Ephron and says, as Hashem's backwards shaliach, you're burying Sarah. That means that you have to get a sadeh, a living space in Eretz Yisrael. And not only that, but it's going to become with eitzim, with trees. You're going to set down roots in Eretz Yisrael. Roots, fruit, trees take time to bear the fruit. No, you're going to be here. You're going to live here and benefit from the fruit and produce of Eretz Yisrael. And of course, what an incredible thing happens. Yitzchak becomes the Ish. That is the persona of Sadeh. Because I'll tell us that when Avram conquered the world with his spiritual resistance, he says himself, Hashem was Elokei Hashamayim. Hashem was a theoretical idea, but it had no practical application. But with Yitzchak and Yaakov, it becomes concrete. Yitzchak in terms of Eretz Yisrael, and Yaakov in terms of Klal Yisrael. Incredible 3 stages. So what's happening here is that Avram is forced to buy a field, and forced to buy, why? Because Yitzchak is ready to receive his Yerusha from his mommy. You follow me? She can force reality even at this time and say, no, we're not going to be Gerim. We're going to be more than Gerim. We're going to be Toshavim. We're going to be legitimately living in a living Eretz Yisrael, not a burial cave. A burial cave is just a Hasama. That's just B'Shamayim. Avram was B'Shamayim. That's soul work. That's soul connections. We need more. We need body connections. And what does Yitzchak, which tefillah does Yitzchak innovate? Mincha. Where did he go to daven Mincha? Yitzchak lasuach basadeh. And what does Yitzchak think Esav is supposed to be? He was an ish sadeh. Oh, great, that's me. Yitzchak says, of course I need Esav. Yaakov is more like, kind of like Avram, where, and I'll give him the brachas of Avram Avinu, but that's all for the very big, long-term future. He never had an issue with giving Yaakov the brachas of Avram Avinu, of the eventual ownership of Eretz Yisrael sometime in the future. But tachlis, if I want Eretz Yisrael now, I need Esav. He's an ish sada. He knows what to do on the practical level. Ish yodei tzayid. He can hunt. He can support. Big mistake, because understood Rivka that Esav will not and cannot have any part of this because of his own failures, and that's sad. He will have a role, but in the future. It says that Esav is compared to a chazir, Esav chazir miyar, from the language of return. To return Eretz Yisrael to the Jewish people, Muslims will never give an inch of Eretz Yisrael to the Jewish people. Even today, look, Trump said, all right, okay. If you agree to police Gaza, I'll make sure there's a Palestinian state. I'll give you part of Eretz Yisrael, because the Arabs can never be Melcham in Eretz Yisrael. Trump could care less. He doesn't care if Jews run Eretz Yisrael. He just doesn't want to pay for it, or whatever his considerations are, his own glory, his own politics, whatever mistakes in his judgment he has, are not necessarily because he doesn't wish the Jewish people to have Eretz Yisrael. It's fine with him. There are practical considerations that he's concerned of, but the Arabs, not an inch. So the point being that the purpose of Edom in the future, which we saw already in the development of Eretz Yisrael 100 years ago, was that the British would be the ones to take Eretz Yisrael away from the Arabs and return it, so to speak, ki'ilu, return it, transition it more likely, against their will really, to the Jewish people. And that's what happens. So there's a role for them, but not in a settlement sense, although they wanted it. The British wanted to take over Eretz Yisrael and keep it. They had every intention of keeping it, but such was not their spiritual destiny. I made a bracha. Now, what happens to Avram after this? After this, We see previously that Avram refused to take any money from Eretz Yisrael because he was offered by the king of Sodom all this wealth from the War of the Four and Five Kings, and he said, "I'm not even going to take a sroch hanal. I'm going to take a shoelace from you. You can't say ani hesharti as Abraham. You're not going to be allowed to say it." So Avram in Eretz Yisrael, zip, zero, nothing. Through Sarah, however, there is a practical kinyan in Eretz Yisrael. So that's as far as Avram goes. But Avram himself saw himself as a ger v'toshev. Now, Avram was an extremely wealthy man, but he hadn't yet matured to be an extremely wealthy man in Eretz Yisrael, except through his great spiritual status, in which people adored him, and through his wife Sarah. But wealth, he was a billionaire, but only in Haran. Okay, that's what made Avram a billionaire. That he gave away gifts, and he continued to do so. When he marries Keturah, who was really Hagar, Chazal tell us, he had a bunch of other children. He sent them to the Far East. A lot of theories about how the Far Eastern religions and philosophies developed, perhaps through the teachings of Avram Avinu, gave them gifts. Avram was a gift giver. So one prerequisite for wealth, especially in Eretz Yisrael, is you have to be a gift giver. Even Sarah's wealth was acquired as a gift. Follow me? And even Maras Machpelah was basically a gift to Ephraim. He gave Ephraim money 10 times more than he ever deserved. He had to buy a field and trees and 10 times the price and coins that would be acceptable anywhere in the world. Avram was willing to give gifts. So you have here now, take out a personal concept. People struggle with wealth, and some people are very successful with wealth, and that's Hashem's, will to a certain extent. But there is a Yerusha that we have that can help us claim abundance. So there are 3 Sodos. One Avram gave us, one Yitzchak gave us, and one Yaakov gave us. So if you feel a block towards your parnasa or a block towards you have a lot of worries about money. If money's an issue for you, you have to reclaim, as Rabbi Akiva said, the mindset that you are a Ben Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and therefore you have an inherent talent for wealth. You have to change your fundamental assumptions. If you view yourself as a prince, as a king, as somebody who's worthy of being fed the highest meals, even if you're, for the moment, a day laborer, that is a huge shift. And it's a shift that we can learn about today. So first understand one thing. No one is doomed to be poor. Because Ein Mazel Yisrael, and if that's in their mazel, we can overcome our mazel, and we can claim our Yerushas Ha'abos. But what was Avram's gift, or Avram's, how shall I say, methodology of attaining wealth? He gave away lots and lots of things. He gave away knowledge. He gave away emunah. He gave away food. He saw himself as a benefactor. So one key, I would say, for those who want to get a different perspective on earning money and maybe liberate themselves from some of the, what we call today, limiting beliefs around money, change your belief system. Be like the Avos. This is your Yerusha. Listen to Rabbi Akiva. Shehem b'nei Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. What does that mean? How do you deserve wealth? Well, emulate the Avos. What was Avram all about? Benefiting others. He's the Ish Chesed. The greatest benefit that Avram could do for other people is to share with them the knowledge of Hashem, the source of all good. And to believe that Hashem is good and he is the source of all good is a great, great, great step forward in your emunah and in your attitude towards life, because you will no longer be, as Jackie Mason used to say, tzabochen, sahagit, upset, eating your heart out. He has a routine where he says every Jew has a building that they didn't buy. Oh, I could have bought that. I could have had that for nothing, and I would have been a billionaire if I would have bought that building. I could have bought that building. I could have bought this building. Every Jew has regrets about what they didn't do to become a multi-millionaire that they could have done. It's not like that. Avram Avinu's attitude was an attitude of being a benefactor. If you want wealth, to be a benefactor of others, and you're willing, and you have the generosity of heart and spirit, that you're not accumulating wealth for your own grandeur, but for kavod shamayim, which is what Avram did, Where did he use his money? He fed people and gave people stuff and he had these riches and wealth. Why? To mashpia on people to love Hashem. He's the source of the mitzvah of Havas Hashem because he caused Hashem's name to be sanctified in the world. As you see, he was able to influence Ephron, he was able to influence Esav, and he was able to influence everybody. Till today, the Abraham Accords. What are the Abraham Accords? Everybody understands that the Abraham means peace, generosity of spirit, goodness. It's not a war. Abraham is the opposite of war because he represents largesse, sharing, commonality. Everybody wins. That's a mindset that's an Avram Avinu midah that is consistent with building wealth. Follow me? So align yourself with Avram. Second alignment is Yitzchak. Here we have it in this week's Parsha in grand detail. Yitzchak is the people of Gerar, who were the Canaanim, who have the bad attitude towards wealth, really bad attitude towards wealth. They're afraid. Their whole relationship towards money is fearful. What did they do? They took the wells, which benefits everybody, right? The wells benefit everybody, and they stopped them up. Why? They said, well, the Gayasim, as Medrash says, people are going to conquer our land from us because of our abundant water sources that Avram revealed, because Avram was ready to give water and health and goodness and wellness to everybody. But we can't do that. We can't be like Avram because we're afraid we're going to lose our land. So we don't even want the wells. We'll keep a smaller quantity of wells, just enough water for us, right, to survive, for fear that if we have a lot of resources of water, we're going to lose it to some foreign army. That means you're afraid. That means you're afraid of losing money. And you could see that they run to Yitzchak. First of all, they kick Yitzchak out. And they claim to be such tzaddikim. Avimelech almost took Rivka, but he didn't take Rivka because, wow, he's such a tzaddik. And, and that we know that's not true. What they lacked was the ability to overcome their fear. They thought money is for them. They thought money is a personal thing. It's like the Gemara says that Rabbi Yeshua, in front of the wicked empire Hadrian, but probably before he turned wicked, Rabbi Yeshua said to him, let me show you that Jewish wisdom, even after our temple was destroyed, we still are the people who carry the wisdom of the world. And I'm going to outsmart your great Rebbes, who are the College of Athens, who contains the wisest people in the world, in your opinion. And he went there, as Gemara gives these are the stories of Saba de Beatuna, the elders of Athens, and he goes and mocks them, ridicules them, and makes mincemeat out of them, and eventually they're destroyed because of Yeshua's wisdom, right? But their thing in those stories describes them as being very proprietary. They would kill anybody who tried to enter the academy. You entered the academy, they would kill you. Why? Because their knowledge was proprietary. They said, we don't want anybody to know what we want. I got the secret formula, of wisdom. I'm not sharing with anybody. That's so not Abrahamic. That's so not universal. Share the wisdom. Now, Havdil Torah is just the opposite. The more Torah you have, the more Torah you want to spread, the better it is. You don't say, I have this Chiddush. You can't see my Sefer. Because maybe you're going to come up with the same Chiddush. Ridiculous. We want to share the wealth. But the sages of Athens like proprietary thing. I have the best formula for weapons. I know how to produce oil. I know how to produce laser beams. I know how to produce spaceships. And I'm not telling you how, and it's trade secrets and all that. It's a wrong attitude. Yitzhak comes and says, I'm like Avram, I'm going to undo the wells and we're all going to have prosperity here. And you don't have to be afraid of anything. There's enough for everybody to go around. One of the Perushim is, L'reyacha means your fellow shepherd. It means that there's enough for him, there's enough for you. Don't worry, there's plenty to go around. Wealth is abundance. There's no lack. Just because I have doesn't mean the other guy doesn't have. But that was the fatal flaw of Canaan. They didn't believe that. They believed that if we have the water, they don't have the water, and they're all based on irrational fears, which are based on lack of belief in Hashem as the source of all good, which has no terminus. The Shefa of Hashem has no end, because Hashem has no end. But their lack of emunah in this led them to do very cruel and stupid things, such as stopping off the wells and kicking out Yitzhak from their midst, who went on to go to Nachal Gerar and nowhere's land and get Mea Sha'arim and plant 100-fold, 100-fold. That's way beyond their dreams. And they come running to Yitzhak and they say, we made a mistake. We see that you have a relationship to wealth and money that we can't even fathom because of your connection to Hashem. Now, what did Yitzhak innovate according to the Rambam? He invented Meiser. We learn it from the word Mea Sha'arim. Mea Sha'arim, it's not just a neighborhood, is the amount of produce that Yitzhak thought he would have to give Meiser. And he says, well, I figure I'm gonna get 10 bushels of wheat out of these seeds. And he didn't get 10 bushels of wheat. He got 100 times 10 bushels of wheat. So he said, I have to give 1 bushel. And it turns out in the end, I'm going to have to give away, right, 100 bushels to tzedakah. We learn the agricultural laws of trumos and maisris and all the giving, which is including others in your wealth, which is supporting spirituality and Torah, because that's who gets it, the Levim and the Kohanim, and then there's Aniyim. All that comes from the great belief of Yitzchak that my wealth comes from Hashem. My wealth comes from Hashem. And Hashem is a partner in my making money. And that's why I give Meiser. And I can even give Chomesh. Chomesh comes later. That's Yaacov. But we learn all the laws of Meiser from Yitzchak because the fatal flaw and the fatal, how shall I say, limiting belief of the Plishtim was that there's not enough money to go around. Money is scarce. If I don't keep it for myself, someone else is going to get it and I'm going to be poor. What a stupidity and a mistake. And if you can make that adjustment in your mind saying, what do I care if this guy's making a lot of money in the same business as me? What does that have to do with me? There's plenty of money to go around. It alleviates so much pain, suffering, and hardship. That's number 2. The lesson of Avram Avinu is you want to be wealthy because you want to bring Kavod Shamayim and you want to help others. Number 1. Number 2, Yitzchak teaches us my wealth doesn't come from me. It comes from Hashem, and my obligation is to be a steward, a faithful, holy steward of the wealth, and apportion it to those who need it. And then I enjoy the benefits 100-fold. That's lesson number 2. Yaakov will get to more because we're just getting introduced to Yaakov. But his lesson was primarily what? It's more relevant for Hanukkah. What does Yaakov do? He goes back and he sits in the house of Lavan for 20 years, killing himself, and he says, I didn't take any deductions. I didn't take any deductions. I gave you, if there was a lost sheep, I paid for it from my own pocket. If there was a sheep that was torn, I paid for my own pocket. And integrity and honesty. That Yaakov was the most honest person when it came to money in the entire world. He was the most responsible. Yaakov teaches us fiscal responsibility, that you have to be clean and clear with your money, not murky and shticky and foggy and sneaky and tricky. Never, unfortunately, one Haredi person was just put in jail for a long time because he did something really, really crooked. And he was abusing people financially and telling them all sorts of lies and stealing their property. And it's just, it's just not the Jewish way. It's just not the Jewish way. The Jewish way is to have, why one of the reasons why Jews throughout the centuries prospered is because we could be trusted. The non-Jews gave us the taverns to run because they knew we wouldn't drink them dry. We knew we wouldn't be irresponsible and addictive. They knew that we would be generous with people. Think about the Chavetz Chaim, his whole thing about his store. If you know the story about the Chavetz Chaim store that he started to support himself because he wanted to be supported by money from yeshiva. And then people used to line up from all over to buy a piece of herring from the Chavetz Chaim, and he would always give like extra herring. And he was like the role model of doing business honestly, which was a big problem in his generation. He was the tochacha to anybody who was cheating and cutting corners in business. It says, learn from me. So eventually he saw he's putting everybody out of business because people only want to buy from him. So he closed his store. And then the other story that he got this big check from Rothschild, because Rothschild heard that the Chavetz Chaim cut him a check, personal check. And the Chavetz Chaim sent it back to him. And Rothschild said, I never got money back from anybody. But the Chavetz Chaim explained, I don't take personal money. If you want to give a donation to the yeshiva, I'll take the yeshiva, but you can't write the check to me. And Rothschild wrote a much bigger check for the yeshiva than he gave to the Chavetz Chaim because he said, I never in my life experienced such scrupulous honesty that people got money and are willing to give it back. Anyway, so these are the 3 principles, and they're all connected to Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael our Kenyan in Eretz Yisrael comes by virtue of our avos. That's our schus. Maras Machpelah is the imprimatur of that. That's the key. And then I'll just want to end by reading something to you that really kind of moved me. But especially as we think about today, about all the issues with the army and the Chatufim and the issue with the Shiva Bachrim and the army and the issues of the army in Gaza. Listen to this. This is something I found. It's a Nevi Meksuvin that's given for soldiers. Okay, and this is the way it's supposed to be. So writes the chief rabbi of the army at the time. His name was Gad Navon. I don't know if he was Yitzhak Navon's son. Yitzhak Navon was a well-respected, traditional person, Sephardic leader, was president of Israel in times of Begin. Anyway, this is what he writes. I'm going to give you a very loose translation. We'll stop. He says, I'm giving you the Sefer, which is the treasure of the Jewish people and the source of our life. This book, the Tanakh, which is our Shtar Mikna, this is our purchased agreement, V'tudat Ba'alut, and our sign of ownership, L'Artzeinu Nachas Avoseinu. There you go. The Torah itself is the purchase agreement for Eretz Yisrael. This is what he writes to every soldier. This Sefer, no Talmano says, Zechus Ku'uma Yechida La'achriz Kabal Am Va'ada Chadeshim V'Nefekedem. This book proves that we are able to renew our sovereignty, our malchus, as days of old. Am Yisrael o Bereshis Sa'adav, Hechel Ma'avram. From the days of Avram, he writes, Avi Ha'uma, father of our nation, Kara B'Shem Kel Echad Bori Olam, Mul Olamei Alilei Sovimato. Avram spoke against everybody else as an individual, against idolatry. V'afki Yochid Hu B'Men, also even though he was singular in his faith. K'mosh Amar Chazal, Avram Amad Mi'ever Achad. The Jewish people are on one side, which is therefore shows the stupidity of trying to be part of the United Nations, part of the Ummos Ha'olam. We are not, and we never were, and we never will be. Echad hu Echad Hayavram, and Klal Yisrael's Am Echad Ba'aretz. It's just not. It's stupidity to go with the cheshbonot of other nations. Davak b'unasav leiv sholem nefesh chafetz v'lo r'tia. He's talking to soldiers now. And he says in Mitzrayim was also a proof that we went to receive the Torah and through Moshe Rabbeinu. And he says, this book that I'm giving you in your hands, this is the source of all human culture morality, is this Sefer, okay? And without it, the world is trash. Netzach Yisrael b'chol hadoros, and the eternity of the Jewish people forever. It's the benefit for the entire world. So he says, Chayalei Tzva Yisrael, who carry the flag of freedom and security for our nation, keep the Sefer Torah, learned it, fulfill its mitzvahs. L'man yishmu, v'man yilmudu, v'yiru es Hashem Elokeichem, v'shamru lasos is called the Torah Zos. That's what a Jewish soldier here in Eretz Yisrael in Chayalei Tzva Haganah is supposed to be. You're learning the Torah. The founding fathers of Israel, for all the secularism, learned Tanakh. And they saw it as their basis of legitimacy. Then Hashem will say, Ki Hashem Elokeichem halechim achem, lehilachem evavechem lo shiaschem. As it says in Dvarim, that's the key to our victory over our enemies, is this simple knowledge. The Masoras Ha'avos, that's our claim to Eretz Yisrael. We have to shry it loud. And not all the nonsense that we're doing, and we're talking about sharing here and sharing there, and because of the Holocaust, and because of security, and because we have to share, and because of morality, and shibyon, and nonsense. It's all nonsense. It's not who we are. It's not who we're destined to be. Hashem should give us the strength to be like Avram Avinu, learn the lessons of the Avos, Avram's generosity, endless generosity, Yitzchak's endless faith, and Yaakov's endless integrity. That's Chesed, Gvura, and Emes, and that will be the key to our Yerusha of Eretz Yisrael now and forever. And let's hope the Gaza plan fails.
YIBONEH